What are you reporting?
I just happened to glimpse and see this thing running across the yard.
Did you see what it was? Was it a person or an animal or?
A good-sized man, or something that looks like a man.
Okay. You've had problems in the neighborhood before?
Yeah, my dog was killed here just recently. I don't know what it was.
Welcome to Sasquatch Hypotheses.
Jesus Christ, you better...
Sure.
See ya!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
Son of a bitch is about 6'9".
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh. Is he in your yard, sir?
Yeah, God, he's big.
Okay, what's he doing in your yard?
He's looking at me.
And the guy is on foot.
I don't know what... It's a big, real big person.
But it is a person.
Yeah, I'd say it was a person, somebody really big. But he's all in black.
Is he a black male or a white male? Did you actually see whether, or was he just wearing black?
He's all black and he's big. He is big.
Episode 2. I had a little problem with getting episode 2 put together. The person that I was originally going to have come on and tell his story was somebody that I had met through my Sasquatch Hypotheses profile on Facebook, and he agreed to come on to the show. And as I was putting together my show notes and everything like that, Facebook locked up my profile, so I have no way of contacting him. His name is Micah, and he saw a Bigfoot through the window of a car, looking at him through the window of a car, when he was a young boy. So unfortunately, I have no way of getting a hold of Micah. I tried to get a hold of him through Google Plus, but so far I haven't heard back from him. So Micah, if you're listening to this show, please email me at sasquatchhypotheses@gmail.com, or just search for me on Google Plus and you'll find me, and we'll get together and get your story on the show. So for tonight's show, instead of having Micah on, and since I didn't have time to really prepare anybody else, I'm going to talk to you folks a little bit about my background and just basically rant about a couple of topics that I've heard on other shows that are kind of a pet peeve with me, at least portions of them. So as far as my background, when I was a kid, I spent time in the city and the country. My mother was from the Boston area, and she met my father when he was in the military. He was stationed up there before he went to Germany, which is where I was born. And my father's family is from the Blue Ridge Mountains in Virginia. So he's basically a hillbilly, or his origins were a hillbilly. So while he was in Vietnam, we actually lived there for a while with Granny, his mother. And I got to, roam around in the woods and get the city kid knocked out of me a little bit. So I was a little bit, I could adapt to either environment, either street kid or wandering around in the woods. Now also, and I'm just going over some bullet points of my background as they are pertinent to what I do here on Sasquatch Hypotheses. I've been drawing since I was about 12 years old. I started out back then, the Planet of the Apes was big, so I used to draw, chimpanzees and gorillas a lot. Also, back then, it was the whole skull and crossbones thing, and that kind of stuff was big. So I drew a lot of that. And, of course, chicks. When you're 12 years old, you do a lot of drawing females. So I did a lot of drawing. I actually got pretty good at it, all self-taught, until when I was about 35, I developed, maybe closer to 40, I developed some sort of peripheral neuropathy. So my hands shake kind of like Parkinson's when I try to do any kind of fine movements with my hands. So obviously I don't draw it so well anymore. Also, when I was 12, I actually had to go to summer school 1 year. Or when I was 12, it's 6th grade, I think, or something like that. In summer school, they did, you complete, at least the summer school I went to, you had to complete summer school, but it wasn't necessarily the course that you took or the course that you failed. So what I actually studied in summer school was stop motion animation, filmmaking, special effects. I have no idea what the heck that had to do with failing English, but I enjoyed it. And that kind of got me into the whole filmmaking, CGI, special effects kind of stuff, which I studied as a hobby pretty much from then on. I've used about every 3D animation program out there, any of the big ones anyway, and some of the small ones really, like Maya, 3ds Max, Blender 3D, those, in at least a half a dozen other ones. I was also in the military for about 6 years. When I was in the military, I was actually in military intelligence, which just prior to me going in was called the Army Security Agency, and they had changed it to military intelligence not long before that, because they wanted it to, all came under an umbrella of Intelligence Security Command. So we studied Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. We all went to the same intelligence schools instead of something specifically Army, specifically Navy. So they changed it from like Army Security Agency to military intelligence. That's what everybody was under. Anyway, while I was in the military, I qualified as an expert marksman. I had been shooting guns since I was about 6 years old. So I basically don't miss when I shoot at something. Maybe more so now that I have this shaking problem, but I still do pretty good. I would probably still qualify as an expert marksman even with the shakes. But back when I was in the Army, I didn't miss. When I was working in military intelligence, I actually, right off the bat, accidentally got into this experimental program that was really fell under DARPA. And while I was working on that, I actually got involved in helping them develop the software that was used to gather intelligence in this experimental tactical system that we had. I can't talk too much about it because of the classification, but in my everyday work, I actually I supported the office of the director of the NSA. I also supported the commanding general of the 3rd Corps and the 8th Army directly. So everything that I worked with was all classified, top secret, SCI, and with a string of caveats that I can't say. But if you've ever seen the movie Enemy of the State with Will Smith, that's basically what I did. That's about as much as I can say about it. And my job specifically was, if you've ever seen the movie, Gene Hackman is in that movie. And Gene Hackman, the job he describes having done when he was working at the NSA is what I did. Only I did it in tactical systems, not at the NSA itself. So like I said, I had a top secret SCI clearance, which in the civilian world is generally referred to as above top secret, although there really is no such thing as above top secret. But top secret SCIs is what most of the time they're referring to when they refer to that in a movie or whatever. So when I got out of the military, because of my experience developing that software and all of that, and because we worked extensively with communications and networking while I was in there, that wasn't really my job, but we had to know what we were doing because we had civilian hardware and software reps that worked with us, but being a tactical unit, if we got fielded out to a combat zone, they weren't going to be there with us. So we had to know how to get the systems up and, do some of that stuff. So when I got out of the Army, I actually continued on in the IT business. I started my own company. I used to make custom computer systems and do consulting for networking and internet and that kind of thing. This was back in the mid-90s, and I got into programming. I taught myself how to program in Python and C++, Perl, and a little bit of PHP. So I became a Linux developer in about 96, 97, and I fooled around with doing that for a while until I actually got an offer I couldn't refuse from an internet company to go in and become their network administrator. And the company was regional, and we ended up going nationwide, and we're working on going international when the .com bust happened and the company went under. So I'm still in IT. I own my own wireless internet company right now. While I was working for that other company, which I skipped over, we also had commercial websites that we were hosting on a room full of servers, and we had I believe it was like 500 or 600 websites that we were hosting for companies around the country. So that's pretty much it as far as my technical background and that kind of stuff. Also, when I was about 12 years old, 12, 13, something like that, I saw a Bigfoot looking in the window, which is episode 1. If you haven't listened to episode 1, I'm just going to hit the high points here for you. I saw a Bigfoot looking in the window at me and my cousins when I was about 12, 13 years old, and from about 4 feet away. We were all sitting at the kitchen table. And I had a good probably 2 minutes to study its face because it was busy looking at my cousin Teresa and listening to her talk. So I had a good 2 minutes to study its face until I finally realized that I wasn't looking at some guy. I was looking at something I'd never seen before, and it spooked me, and I ran, and that was kind of the end of that. I've also at the time didn't realize it because I was young, but thinking back, I realized that I've been paralleled through the woods by a Bigfoot, probably the same one actually. And also years later, camping with a couple of my friends, I think we had at least one Bigfoot, probably two minimum, encircling our camp. But we thought, it was, well, my friends were freaking out, but I tried to convince them it was something, harmless, like raccoons and stuff like that. But it was pretty heavy sticks being broken out there and stuff. So that's so I've had some Bigfoot experiences, and one for sure. The other two, it could be or may not, but I'm pretty convinced myself that those were also Bigfoots paralleling and watching us as we camped on the side of the mountain. The camping trip was actually up in the White Mountains in New Hampshire. So that's pretty much all of the background. Now on to the topics, and I'm going to go into pet peeves and also my theories on these topics. First off, I want to talk about there's a lot of talk out there in the Bigfoot community about government conspiracies, government cover-ups. Now, I've listened to a lot of these stories, and I'm going to mention specifically, stories that I heard on Sasquatch Chronicles, because that's a fairly popular show, and I listened to it myself. It's a good show. I don't agree with some of the conclusions that the hosts, or I guess host now, I guess his brother's back on it now. The hosts can come up with some of the things, but we don't all agree about anything, everything anyway. But specifically as far as the government conspiracies go, there's a couple of stories that come to mind that are really kind of the perfect examples of what I'm going to talk about here. One of which there was this operation. Actually, it was this guy who came on there, and he wanted to share this story that was told to him secondhand, which to me automatically would be a red flag. But this guy's telling a story about some other guy that he talked to. I think he was selling Bibles or something. I don't know what the guy was doing, but there was a guy that was, I guess he wasn't doing too good. He was dying of emphysema, who wanted to get this off his chest. This is the story, allegedly. So he told him that when he was working as a sheriff's deputy or something in some small town, that he was approached by the government to him and another deputy or something. Might have been two. I know it was at least one. They wanted him to. I guess he was the sheriff. They wanted him to get a team together so that they could go out and they could put down these Sasquatch. So they got into helicopters and they were out, scaring these Sasquatch downrange into a trap. And then when they got to the trap, they were going to gun them down. And things went wrong and whatever. The guy supposedly took pictures, and these were supposed to be very clear pictures. And his deputy had climbed down a rope ladder off of this helicopter and was dangling from the helicopter, suspended on a rope ladder, and used a rifle to kill a Sasquatch on the ground. As I said before, I was an expert marksman in the military. Actually, if I hadn't have got a double feed on my final qualifying and basic training, I was actually going to end up going to sniper school. That's how good a shot I was. And I don't know if any of you, if you've ridden in a helicopter, you know that if you're in the helicopter, it'd be pretty difficult for you to make a shot like that. That's why, if in the Vietnam and on the Hueys, they have an M60 mounted to the side of the helicopter, or a 50 cal. I think it's just 60s though. They mount machine guns to the side of the helicopter. And the reason that they mount the machine guns to the side of the helicopter is because it's almost impossible to make a shot with a single shot bolt action kind of weapon, or any kind of single shot weapon, because of the way that the helicopter moves. Now, this guy supposedly, not only was he shooting from a helicopter, but he was shooting from a rope ladder hanging from a helicopter. So I have my doubts as to whether, I'm sure somebody can do it. I might even be able to do it. But having ridden in a helicopter, I know it wouldn't be easy, and I probably wouldn't hit it the first time. So I really have my doubts about that. Unless that rope ladder was hanging right smack in front of that Sasquatch, where you could move the barrel back and forth a considerable amount and still hit the thing. I really have my doubts about it. But, not knowing exactly what the environment was and exactly what was going on, I can't say for sure, but I'm just saying I have my doubts about that. But I'm not really into that. I'm talking about government conspiracy here. So that's just one of the things that makes me doubt the story. The other thing that makes me doubt, one of the other factors that makes me doubt the story, is that here you have a government unit that comes out, and they're tasked with eliminating these Sasquatch. And evidently they didn't bring their own snipers. So they had to go and get the local sheriff to shoot these things, because evidently none of them could. There again, I really have my doubts about whether or not that would be the case. Not just because I think military personnel who are trained to shoot weapons are probably better shots than most civilians. Those that are good, I mean, you have military people who are terrible shots too, but then you have military people who end up doing these kinds of missions. Most of them are damn good shots, better than average, and you're going to be hard pressed to just walk into a sheriff's department and pick up two guys. They're going to be able to shoot as good as or better than the worst shots in the Army. That's just the way it is. So there's another warning sign right there for this story for me. And then, if this unit this is their job to go out and do this, not only would they bring their own marksmen, but they're not going to involve people who haven't been read on to the situation. And read on, if you don't know, is a term used by if you have a security clearance. That's where you have to sign. You read about what the mission is, and this isn't like a single mission. I guess it could be, but in general, it's not a single mission. Like the guys who are assigned to the unit to go around the country and kill these Sasquatch, rogue Sasquatches. They would be, when they were first brought in and indoctrinated into this mission, into the unit, they would be read on to what the unit's mission is, and that's to travel around and kill all the rogue Sasquatch. So, and then they have to sign non-disclosure and so forth. So, when you have a security clearance, when you have a top secret security clearance, there's three categories. If you're, you have your regular secret and top secret, then you have your, and I'm trying to put this in civilian terms, you have your next level up, which is a little bit more serious, secret and top secret, and then you have your SCI. Your SCI is the highest clearances that you can get. Now, when you get a secret, top secret clearance, secret or top secret clearance at, say, Cat 2, you're only investigated Now I say only, but they do a 5-year background investigation on you. If you get a top secret SCI or a secret SCI, which there really isn't much of that, but top secret SCI, they do a 15-year background investigation on you. So when I went in and I got my TSSCI, they did a 15-year background investigation on me, which took them 11 months to complete. So now this guy is saying that this unit came over, walked into his office, and decided to give him access to what I assume was at least Category 2 classified information, which requires that everybody involved have at least a 5-year background investigation. But they just walked into his office and let him and one of his deputies join the mission because they didn't bring their own marksman. I just don't believe it. I find I find it very hard to believe it. And now this isn't like Category 2, Cat 1, 2, and 3, classified. It's not like it's something new. I mean, I was in the military. What the hell? Over 25 years ago. And it had been around for at least 20 years when I went in. So this is a long time that these protocols and these standards for classified have been around. So it's not like this, maybe this happened before classified was handled that way. I really doubt it. I mean, we're going back into the 50s and 60s when this stuff was established. So, don't think so. They don't have the proper background investigation. They don't have proper clearance. The unit would have brought their own marksman. This is supposed to be a classified black operation because they don't want it getting out, and they just trust the first schmo that they run into that has a gun. I don't think so. Okay? And then on top of that, there's the whole business of being able to pick a Sasquatch, a moving Sasquatch. You're going to pick him off from dangling from a rope ladder from a helicopter. Don't think so. I mean, anything's possible. But having been there, having actually worked in classified operations and knowing classified doctrine and protocols, and there are strict protocols you have to adhere to, no matter how small the task is when you're working with classified information that it's a Cat 2 or above. You just can't be slipshod. You can't be sloppy about it. You can't just do crazy stuff like that. I could go on about why, give you examples of just how picky the classified protocols are about the smallest little things. Well, I'll give you one example. When we had a hard drive from a computer that had been used in the SCIF, in the secure facility, and say that computer, the hard drive died, it went bad. What we had to do was to dismantle the hard drive, take it apart, take the platters out of it, the little metal discs inside that actually store the data magnetically. And this is after it's been wiped 3 times with an encrypted, I don't think I should say but it's an encrypted sequence that is repeated across the entire disk 3 times. You go over the whole disk once, twice, 3 times. And then after that's done, you would have to take the platters out of the hard drive, and then we would have to go back and take a grinder, and we would have to grind the face of the disks. And then after we grind the face of the disc, we had to chop them into small pieces about 1 inch big. And then they would be sent off to be melted down. So I thought it was overkill at the time. But that's what we had to do in order to destroy a hard drive. And it didn't matter what the hard drive was used for, as long as that hard drive was was inside the fence. It could have been used, you know, by the MPs who were just basically playing solitaire at the guard shack. It didn't matter. We still had to destroy it like that. So that's how picky working with classified is. So you're not going to have these guys doing this kind of stuff like this guy's describing. So anyway, there's your example. So it was hearsay. They're using Billy Bob and Joe Schmo out of the local sheriffs. They're doing it dangling from a helicopter. The whole thing is just unbelievable to me. Doesn't follow any classified protocols. Okay, now let me talk about the second story that I heard that is just as unbelievable to me. And that was a story about a cop. And I don't know where he was, anything like that, but he had investigated, he had investigated a Sasquatch was harassing, I think it was an old man or an old woman or a couple, something like that. And in the course of his investigation, these two guys who supposedly show up everywhere show up at his police station, and he's brought into the office and told that he's to forget all about this case, and he had to hand over his case files. And if I remember correctly, the guy somehow found out that these two guys worked for the Department of the Interior. Was it Department of Interior? Basically, they worked for the people who were in charge of the forests, the national forests and stuff. And these guys had such authority that they were able to come into town and tell his sheriff or his chief or whatever, his chief of police or whatever it is, whether it was a sheriff or chief of police, I don't remember, but the boss, the guy over the whole department, was able to tell him that you need to tell this guy that's it, and or we're going to start some kind of trouble. And I guess the guy was being threatened with losing his job and that kind of stuff, but he didn't lose his job. So then later on, he did some show with on Sasquatch Chronicles. I think it was called Down the Rabbit Hole or something, where he was on duty while he was talking to them on their show for an hour, or 45 minutes, 40 minutes, something like that. And then he got called away to a 911 call. And then supposedly after he's called in for this 911 call, it turns out that it was a hang-up. And he gets there, and the house that it was located at was abandoned. And then he got called into the department and said, you know, why did it take you so long to get there? And he said, well, when they looked at the timing, it only took him 2 minutes to get there. Now, this guy had been telling them a story about how these same two guys had been hauling ass through town. I think he said they were in a black van, and he recognized them. So he chased them down because they were exceeding the speed limit. They pull over, and he goes up there and he's like, hey, you know what? You're exceeding the speed limit. And he's referred to it as code something, code 4, code 2, whatever, police lingo. What the hell are you doing? That kind of thing. And they said, well, we got business. And he said, really, you got business? So he goes, hey, why don't you tell me, and I'm kind of paraphrasing, if you've listened to this show, you know what I'm talking about. He said, why don't you talk to me? Why don't, I could help you guys. And they're all hemming and hawing. He goes, hey, get out of the truck. Let's go back here. And then they open up the back of the van, and he sits on the back of the van and starts telling them how, hey, I can be an asset to you and all of this stuff. And I guess eventually, by the time they finish the conversation, they say, you know what, maybe you should come and work for us and that kind of thing. And he turned down the job. I don't even know where to start with what the hell's wrong with that story. the things that stick out like a sore thumb for me are these guys had earlier, weeks or whatever before this, before he pulled them over, had threatened him with losing his job, had pulled him in to talk to his boss, who took his file, told him to stop investigating this thing, and threatened that he would lose his job. And yet, when they go hauling ass through town, because as they said, they had somewhere they had to be, theoretically or supposedly they were on their way to do what they do as far as Sasquatch in their classified capacity, and they pull over for this town sheriff or deputy or whatever it was. I find that hard to believe. If this guy meant so little to them, if they're so powerful that they could just have him lose his job in the blink of an eye, why would they pull over for him when they're on their way to what evidently was a critical call that they had to exceed the speed that they were doing like 60 and a 30 according to him. So they're exceeding the speed limit, hauling ass to get somewhere, and they pull over because he pulls them over. He knows who they are. They had to have known he knows who they are, and yet they pulled over for him because why? Why would they have pulled over for him? Then not only that, let's just assume that out of a courtesy they pulled over, and then they tell him, well, they gotta go. They're on their way to a call or whatever, and he says, hey, you know what? Get out of the van. Let's go back here and have us a chit chat. And they do. They open up the back of the van. They sit down. And I don't know if they had a cooler of beer there or what, but they sit down and have a good old chat. Whatever happened to the emergency call these guys were on? The whole story just doesn't make sense to me. And then he's telling this story while he's on Sasquatch Chronicles, while he's supposedly on duty. Well, I would certainly hope that a cop who's on duty is not just sitting there in the back of a cornfield talking on his cell phone for 40 minutes. Don't they make their presence known to the people who live in their town, drive around in the streets so that people feel safe? I'm from the city. Maybe. I live in the country now, but I live out in the country, like out in farmland. I don't live in town where, I don't know if the cops drive around so that people can actually see them, know that they're there, know that they're keeping an eye on things. But that's what I would suspect. So the whole thing just doesn't jive with me, and these guys aren't going to sit down in the back of their van and start talking to him about classified information. Like I told you, classified information is guarded very closely, and there are certain protocols you follow. You don't just start talking to somebody. It just doesn't happen. These are the kinds of things, these stories that I'm hearing about these government cover-ups and everything. When I hear people go on these shows and they describe what happened, what I hear is people describing it the way that the movies represent it. It doesn't happen that way. When you're really working in a classified environment, it's a whole different scenario than what you see in the movies. You don't go home and talk to your wife about classified stuff. You don't go home and people who are working with classified information at that level do not, go out and talk about it over lunch. They don't go, meet have a barbecue in their backyard and talk about it. You don't do it. You only discuss it when you are in a secure facility. Period. And you just can't do it. Trust me, I was there. I went to barbecues with people. Nobody discussed anything. You could not do it. And everybody took it very seriously. In the facilities I worked, and here's another thing I found funny, and this was on Finding Bigfoot. There was a guy talking about, it was the Atomic Bigfoot episode or something, where they said, a townie said, hey, the government knows all about this, and it's a plot. They're trying to keep people from finding out that Bigfoots are out here, or some crap like that. but they supposedly had an old where they had made atomic bombs or something. And he said, I can take you right up as close as you can legally go to this thing. So, you know, they went out there to do an investigation, and there was this chain link fence. And supposedly this facility, according to them, is highly classified. And I think they even, and don't quote me, they might not have said this, I'm thinking about another story here. But I think they said that it was also classified to the point where it supposedly didn't exist, kind of like Area 51. So when they were filming, they filmed this chain link fence with a sign on it that said, no trespassing or something like that. Well, let me tell you something. When you're dealing with classified, high-level classified information, when you go up to this chain link fence, the sign doesn't say no trespassing or trespassing will be prosecuted. It says you will be shot. It says lethal force authorized. If you don't see lethal force authorized on a sign on a fence, it's not a classified facility. It's just government property is all it is. Classified information is guarded with lethal force, at least at the level that I worked with. You know, maybe lesser classified, they might only, you know, put up a no trespassing thing. But when you're talking about something, and I'm assuming that these guys are representing these men in black, Bigfoot men in black, are working at the highest level, black ops kind of stuff, which is you're not going to deal with. It's not just going to be a regular trespassing sign. It's going to say lethal force authorized. So these things that you hear a lot of times, they're just bullshit. They're people trying to over dramatize a lesser situation, or they're trying to read into it what really isn't there. They just, or they're just trying to make themselves seem more important because they've done this or something. But it's just not true, you know. And like I have told, I've actually sent a message to Wes there, Sasquatch Chronicles, and told him, if you want, I will vet anybody who tries to tell you that they have classified information, because there are certain things you don't have to know what their mission is. There are certain things that apply to every classified mission, period. There are certain things that you have to do with all classified information, and I mean, you have to. There's no way around it. You absolutely have to do these things. So if I were to talk to somebody who supposedly is dealing with classified, I could just ask them a few simple questions, and I could tell you by their answers whether they're telling the truth or not. Of course, I never heard anything back from Wes, but he supposedly gets thousands of emails now, so maybe he just hasn't come across it yet. But the point is that because of those certain things protocols you have to follow when you're dealing with classified, it's really easy to spot a liar. Really easy. And when I hear these guys talking about trying to sound like they're describing a classified black operation, there are certain things I hear and I'm like, well, that's out of a movie, because that's not real. That's not how you do things. You know, I guess I should put it a different way. I shouldn't say that they're lying, because maybe they really believe what they're talking about. So it's not necessarily a lie or a hoax. It could be just that somebody else is perpetrating a hoax on them, on these people. I would sooner believe, for instance, if Wes has said that he receives emails from people who have talked about the things that go on with Bob down there in Texas. I would suspect that this guy knows Bob, and that he's actually trying to lend credibility to the things that Bob's saying by contacting Wes as a different person. and saying, oh yeah, I work for them and this is what I'm saying. I mean, unless you actually can verify that this guy works there and he is who he is. I mean, literally verify it, not just ask a couple of people, because you don't know who, he might have done the same thing to these people, You have to be able to verify it. So, to me, it's very likely that if somebody's trying to drive up hits to their YouTube site, why wouldn't they say, get a buddy to, hey, why don't you contact this guy and say that you work for these people, and this is the stuff that and link it back to me, and then I'll say, oh yeah, that's, how did you know all that? I mean, to me it's a likely scenario, more likely scenario, that that's what's happening, than that some guy who's putting his job at risk, is talking about these things happening, which for one I know is bullshit. It's because it doesn't happen that way. So anyway, I'm not trying to say the people are lying directly. I think that if there are people out there contacting people in the Sasquatch community and threatening them and saying, hey, you shouldn't do it, to me, I personally think that that's probably the skeptics who are trying to screw with us. Other guys who are trying to somehow drive up their viewers, things like that. The government doesn't have to call you and threaten you. They could very easily have a car go down, pick you up at your house, because they have the authority to do that. Take you to an FBI substation or something like that. Take you into an interrogation room and say, look, here's the deal. You're going to sign a non-disclosure agreement, and that's the end of it. They could do that. They don't have to play these games. Now, one other story that was on Sasquatch Chronicles that I think is just complete bullshit is a story about a guy named Bob down in Texas. Now, I'm not saying that Bob hasn't seen Sasquatch or anything like that. I'm talking about his government conspiracy theories. He talked about how he got this awesome footage of two Sasquatches staring at them, at him and his two other companions there, while they were out, in the woods. And he got back to his house, and actually, I think he was kicked off. He was kicked out or something. I know that at least one time he said that the men in black, quote unquote, had kicked him out and told him, I guess had been telling him he better watch his ass and that kind of stuff. So he was being harassed by these men in black. They follow him around, that kind of thing. So he had gotten this, this one time, he had gotten this, according to him, perfect video of the Sasquatch, and went back to his house and was going to upload it immediately to his YouTube site. And this is the guy who talks about that campsite where the Sasquatch, I guess, had attacked the people and tore up the campsite down there in Texas. Which I saw the original video he first put up like a day or two after he put it up, and it didn't have blood and all that stuff in it. And so here, the story he told about that on Sasquatch Chronicles did not match up with the video that I saw. But anyway, this is a different incident. He takes the video, gets the video of the Sasquatch, he gets home, and he goes to upload it, and he says all of a sudden this shell screen pops up on his computer, and a shell screen, a command prompt. It's a DOS prompt, if you know what I mean. It's a black window has a little C colon and a caret. That's a command line, a command shell. And he says that pops up, and all of a sudden a whole bunch of crap starts scrolling, a bunch of ones and zeros, and next thing he knew, I don't know if his whole computer was wiped out, but that video was gone. Which I think, well, that's quite convenient that the moment you're trying to upload it, these government men in black get into your computer and delete it. Like I said in my background, I've done programming. I've been doing networking. I even once upon a time did a little hacking. And I'll tell you, that is not how it happens. That might be what they do in the movies. See, when you're doing movies, like I said in my background, I studied filmmaking. Actually, I've written some screenplays, some that only got produced. When you're doing movies, you have to, as far as visuals, you have to do a visual that gets across the idea so that the people watching the movie know what's going on. So when you see in the movies things like screens scrolling ones and zeros and that kind of stuff, that's to get the point across to the audience that something is happening to the computer on a binary level. Because everyone knows what binaries is. Binary is ones and zeros. That's computer language. What most people don't know is that that's not literally the case. When you look at a program that's on a computer, if you get some kind of a text editor or whatever that will just display what a binary program is, like a compiled program, it's just going to look like a bunch of crap when you open it up. It's not going to be ones and zeros. The only way that you see ones and zeros is if you use a binary editor, and that's a special type of editor that can read it right off, read the physical media itself. So to say you're seeing ones and zeros flashing across your screen is just bullshit. It doesn't happen. In addition to that, they're not going to do that. There are so many ways that they could take care of this guy if that's what they want to do, that they don't have to break into his computer and wipe out a single file that he only got, an hour before that? What are they, psychic? Or does he think that he's bugged too? Because I'll tell you what, personally, I think the government has a lot better things to do than to be bugging Bob in Texas. I don't think that they care that much about what he's doing down there. Because why would they? Have you looked at his YouTube site? There's very little. There's nothing there. And when you talk to him and his cronies, they say, well, we don't want to post the good stuff, or we don't want to post this other stuff we have. We have all kinds of video and photographs of Sasquatch, but we choose not to post it because they don't want to be, I guess, ridiculed or whatever. They don't want people scrutinizing the pictures and saying it's not what they say it is, etc. Well, okay, but you would prefer to be scrutinized by the government, and you're getting it either way. Why don't you post what the heck you got? If you have something that proves Sasquatches exist, put it up there. And this goes to anybody, because you have Todd standing up there. That guy is such a joke. I take very seriously the what is it he says on that show? I take very seriously the confidentiality of these creatures. Really, he's trying to, supposedly he wants to have them protected, but he doesn't do anything to prove to anybody that they exist. He takes them very confidentially. Finding Bigfoot went out there to supposedly prove or see about some sighting he got, the what do they call it, the watcher or something like that, where the thing is standing and then it squats down in the brush. So they go out there to talk to him, and this guy takes him to a location that's similar to the location where he took the footage. Are you kidding me? Why did they even waste their resources to go out there? I can only assume that they didn't know he was going to do that. But why would he do that? It's like, hey guys, come out here and let's prove that I saw that this footage is genuine, but I'm not going to take you to the actual site so that you can do a size comparison or anything like that. You're just gonna have to take my word for it. And then he says, and then he does this self-indulgent speech about how nothing's ever going to be good enough, that you could have the best video and all that, which may be true, but he's not helping matters by playing the games he's playing. Anyway, as far as Bob and his scrolling ones and zeros, that is not what it looks like when somebody hacks your computer, people. When somebody hacks your computer, you don't even know it happened. And they don't need a shell prompt to pop up on their display to do it. I mean, if that happened, that was somebody messing with them, and not the government. The government's a lot better at doing it than that. As far as these conspiracies and stuff, I'm not saying they don't happen. Maybe they do. I'm saying the stories I've heard are bullshit. I know because of my background in programming and networking, and I was a network engineer, and I had top secret clearance. I worked with the NSA. I know my background gives me puts me in the unique position to determine whether these people are telling the truth or not. And I've not heard anyone that sounded legitimate so far. Now, as far as whether these government conspiracies do happen, perhaps they do. The theory that they're trying to protect the logging industry, I don't know if I buy into that one as much. I'm sure that it's a huge industry and so on, but I don't know that they would chance the fallout. I'm sure it's going to end up, one of these activists, one of these animal groups is going to sue the government. Because once it comes out that these things are real, and they just bring a bunch of witnesses in that talk about these guys covering it up, there's going to be a lawsuit. So I don't think the government would, and since it's the biggest, it will be the biggest discovery, in I don't know if it would be zoological history or whatever, anthropology history. I don't know what you would call it, but it's huge. And then the fact that the government covered it up, that's not going to look too good at all on them. So I don't know that they would do it. I think that they would probably, if they knew about these things being out there, they would probably take steps to maybe guide or move the industry, these logging industry, away from where their habitat is, to give them a habitat, so that in the end, when it does come out, they can say, well, we've been working to protect them all along. Something like that would happen. They wouldn't try to hide it. And at this point, the way most people are, most skeptics are, they think everyone's crazy if you believe in Bigfoot. I don't think they feel like they have to, because you come out there and you say, I saw footprints. Nobody cares. You have a blob squatch picture. Nobody cares. They think it's a hoax. There's really not much they have to do to keep it quiet. So why would they? I think if they are trying to keep it quiet, it would be because they know that they exist. They've already looked at, they've already got a hold of one or two or whatever, and they've discovered that they're a sentient species. That these are creatures that the can of worms isn't going to be the logging industry. The can of worms is going to be similar to when we came over here and we the way we treated the Native Americans. That, I think, is what the can of worms is going to be. I think, if anything, it's because they found out that Sasquatch is a developing race that has intelligence and can communicate, and they're self-aware, and being here in the country, they're entitled to civil rights. They're entitled to ownership of land. That, to me, would be more a bigger reason why the government would want to cover it up. you know. And since the Sasquatch are out there and they seem to be happy, you know, I think the deal would be that if we were to be able to capture a Sasquatch and discover that this is a being that has a language and we can communicate with it, and then we start to tell the Sasquatch, you know, what's what, and that they deserve these things, that maybe the Sasquatch is going to start demanding it, but right now they're happy, so they want to keep us separated. That would be my theory as far as a government cover-up would go. I don't think they really care about the logging industry and that. We know that we have these, I would call it an angel investor. These angels out there who are funding people to do Bigfoot research. We know that they buy them equipment. I mean, it's like the bottomless pit of money. Who's to say that skeptics don't have the same thing? I mean, maybe there's a guy out here who's got more money than God, and he says, I'm going to try and, you know, throw a wrench in this whole Bigfoot thing. Maybe for all we know, it could be the logging companies. You know, I mean, if they're looking at possibly having losing, you know, millions or billions or whatever it happens to be dollars, maybe these men in black don't work for the government. They work for the logging industry, and the government doesn't know anything about it. You know, maybe these guys do work for the Department of the Interior, which to me is a joke. I mean, how is the Department of the Interior going to have any kind of authority over a law enforcement agency? But let's say they work for the Department of the Interior, and the logging industry is paying them on the side to use their credentials to wreak a little havoc in the Bigfoot community, to go out here and cover stuff up. And that's what these guys do, you know? Who knows? To me, that's a more likely scenario than the government itself is actually behind it. I don't think so. I would sooner think that it's a private company that has something to gain, or a private person that has something to gain from causing this kind of dissension in the Bigfoot community. The government, they have easier ways of doing it. They don't have to play games. You know, I mean, they can come and get you and take you and make you disappear, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. They could do it under the Patriot Act, which, I don't know, maybe the Patriot Act don't exist anymore, but I think it's only part of it that's gone. But Gitmo, they could send you down to Gitmo, all over with, bye-bye. You know, because you could be considered, they could twist it into you being some kind of an economic terrorist, because you're trying to cause a failure in the logging industry, which would mess up the economy. I mean, they could turn it into that. But ultimately, they don't have to. They could pick you up, put you in Gitmo, and when everyone says, why did you grab them? They say, we can't discuss that. It's a matter of national security. And that's the end of it. You would just never be heard from again. So for people to think they're playing these shadow games, that they're sneaking around, and, you know, they're covering up footprints and all that stuff, it's just silliness, really. So those are just some pet peeves as far as that. Let me move on here. I'm stuck on this classified stuff a little too long. Let's move on. Stick structures. Okay, here's this isn't a pet peeve. This is just me. I'm gonna kind of throw out there what my theories on stick structures are. All right. As far as I'm concerned, I mean, right up the street from here, we don't have any. I mean, I guess we could have a Bigfoot that travels through here now and then, because I am in Ohio. But I'm in northwestern Ohio. At best, we would have a Sasquatch that travels along, you know, the rivers and stuff, the creeks and rivers, to get from, you know, one spot to another, but he ain't stopping here for long. But if you go right up the road here, about maybe a mile from where I'm at, there's a river that goes through and it eventually connects up with one of the Great Lakes up here. But if you go down there, there's a whole lot of broken trees, downed trees. You know, I mean, I keep meaning to, and I probably will and make another show out of it, is walk through there with a camera and see how many quote stick structures, as like those TP structures that I could find in there, because I'm fairly certain that none of them have been created by a Bigfoot. So I think that in a lot of cases, a lot of structures can be explained as just, we have really bad wind here, and I'm sure that's exactly what causes it. Nobody around here can have a fence. You can't have, well, you could have a chain link fence, but you couldn't have like a wooden fence. I have a wooden fence I built out here outside the house, and I have to brace it with 2x4s because the wind is so bad that it'll just rip the fence. We have a barn across the road here that we had a squall line come through here a couple of years ago and literally ripped the doors off of it. So, I mean, the wind gets pretty bad up here. We have wind generators. This is a generator farm here. We have them tall windmills. From here, because I'm right at the state line, from here for about, I think it's about 10-15 miles, there's nothing but windmills. That's how much wind we get here. So I'm sure that that's what's going on down there. However, if you go in there and look around, you would probably, if you were the kind of person who wanted to see Bigfoot in everything that you're seeing out here, you would probably think, oh my God, Bigfoots. There must have been a dozen of them had a rumble out here, because there's just broken trees and stuff everywhere. So there's a natural explanation for these stick structures in many cases. However, I do believe that Sasquatch has something to do with some of it, or could, and mainly because I can think of reasons why they would create these certain stick structures. The inverted trees. Now that one's kind of the trees are stuck in the ground and they're upside down and the roots are sticking up in the air. That one to me is that's baffling. I mean, if somebody's doing that, if that is a hoax, I really would love to know what the hell they're doing. Why are they sticking those trees, and how? Because if it's to be believed, because I've never seen one myself, if it's to be believed, these trees are shoved in the ground pretty far. And some of the ones I've seen are in places where it would be pretty tough to get a piece of heavy equipment out there to do it without leaving some kind of trace that the heavy equipment had been in there. Like the ground's all tore up from them getting up in there and that kind of thing. But it looks like, pristine meadow, and it just has a tree sticking out of it. So those are really interesting, really intriguing. My theory on those things is that there's some kind of markers. Hell, they could mark the place where a Sasquatch died. That would kind of make sense, kind of like a gravestone almost. They could mark maybe a corner, like a cornerstone, mark the center of multiple territories between competing alpha males. Something along those lines. Those are the most enigmatic of the tree structures as far as I'm concerned. The one thing that I think those trees are used for is some kind of distance marker, because they're going to stick up above everything else, so a Sasquatch will be able to see it from considerable distance, unlike the teepee structures, because those teepee structures, from a distance, the Sasquatch, nobody's going to know whether those are natural or unnatural. However, that tree upside down with the roots sticking up in the air, first of all, it's usually a pretty tall tree, and you can see the roots from a good distance. There's no mistaking what that thing is. So they're obviously used for some sort of a distance, some sort of marker that they need to be able to determine from a distance, not close up, not as they're walking through kind of thing. So as far as those TP type structures, again, I don't have any around here. I would love to be able to investigate them. Ones that I would be pretty sure were Sasquatch related. I would love to be able to scrutinize them a little bit more. But I don't have that luxury. So if any of you out there have that luxury, listen to my theory here, and feel free to get in touch with me and let me know if you think it could be or not. But I think those teepee structures are quite possibly hunting blinds. You know, if you were to walk around them, the ones I've seen, well, some not so, some no, some yes. They seem to have, the sticks are set up so that they're thicker on one side, and it just, to me, it seems a lot like a hunting blind. And I'm not so sure that the teepee structures that are being found aren't old, disused Sasquatch hunting blinds, because when they first put them up there, they might have had branches on them and leaves, so that you could not see them. So the Sasquatch would get in the middle of it, and when the prey comes by, the deer or whatever, bang, he's got them. So it'd be interesting to know if those are on game trails, you know, on or near game trails. If there's any kind of a vantage point that they have, that kind of thing. If any of them are brand new, and do they have leaves? Don't they have leaves? You know, are they constructed in such a way that if a Sasquatch was in there, there would be some direction where you would not see it in there, or it would be difficult to see, because deer don't have a very good eyesight as far as you know, if you're standing still, they have a hard time figuring out you're there. Alright, so that's my theory on the teepees. Now, you have the bent over saplings. I've not heard anybody give a theory on what those are. The teepee structures, I heard, what is it? I think it was on Wes Stroud's show. He said that supposedly it's whenever there's a newborn, you know, a birth, they build it, and then each stick represents one of the family members or something. I don't know if I believe that, but I guess it could be. But as far as the bent over saplings, I haven't heard anybody say anything about that. There's the whole X thing. I don't know. I don't know if I believe that. I guess it could be. But in any case, the X's are, most of the ones that I've seen that I put any credibility in that being a possibility, are actually, you know, they're kind of large X's, large X structures. I'm talking about the saplings that are just bent over and stuck in the ground, or put up underneath a log or whatever like that. What I've noticed is that all of those saplings, all the ones I've seen, well, 95% of them are, they're only, what, maybe 3 to 5 feet off the ground at the apex where they're bent, you know, the high point. And I watched a video here recently, a guy named Freddie, I think it's Freddie Canny. He had videotaped back in the woods there, I think he's in Virginia or West Virginia, where there's a lot of those saplings bent over. And this is really where I came up with this theory, because I had always been baffled by what the heck that would be for, until I saw this video. And I think, to me, it looks like those saplings are bent over as a means of funneling the game, to guide the game in a direction. Because if you're chasing a deer, and that deer goes hauling butt through the trees, it's trying to escape being chased. It's not going to try and go over or through these saplings that are bent over. It's going to turn. So I think the saplings being bent over by the Sasquatch are quite possibly a means of controlling the direction that the deer is going. to funnel them into an ambush point. But Freddy's video, he didn't film it in such a way that you could tell what the patterns were, to see if there was basically a corridor that it seemed that the deer could have been being forced to follow. So it'd be very interesting to hear from somebody out there, if you have an area that has those kinds of structures in it, if you could go out and have a look and see if that could possibly be what it is that, you know, they do appear to be set up in such a way that if you were running a deer, that deer would continue to move in a specific direction and end up at a perfect ambush point. It would be very interesting to hear that. So that's pretty much it. That's my rambling episode about my theories and pet peeves and that kind of thing. If you'd like to come on the show and talk about your experience and any theories that you've any conclusions or theories that you've come up with based on your experience, feel free to give me an email at Sasquatch Hypotheses. That's an ES, not an IS, it's plural, at gmail.com. Give me a little broad strokes of your story so I can know what you're talking about. Be more than happy to have you on the show. Or you can contact me through my Google Plus page, Sasquatch Hypothesis. Just search for Sasquatch Hypotheses on Google Plus and you'll find it. And also my YouTube channel, again, Sasquatch Hypotheses. And if you're listening to this, you probably already know that or have a way of getting to my YouTube channel anyway. But there you go. So anyway, that's the show. Good night.